Okay, so
Yeah.
ready to dive into something pretty crucial for anyone thinking about taking the IELTS.
Absolutely. We're talking about the speaking test. I think this is where a lot of people get nervous.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's not just about, ticking boxes or memorizing facts. It's about showing you can actually communicate in English, right?
Right. And a strong performance here can really make a difference to your overall band score.
Exactly. So let's break it down, make it super clear how this test works, what they're looking for, and how to absolutely smash it. Let's start with, the basics. What does the IELTS speaking test actually look like?
Okay. So the speaking test has 3 parts. And the first part is called the introduction and interview.
Introduction and interview. Sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah, this is kind of the icebreaker. It lasts about 4 to 5 minutes. You'll be asked about yourself, familiar topics, your work, hobbies, where you're from, stuff like that.
So first impressions count.
Absolutely. It's all about showing you can talk comfortably about everyday things. Then we move on to part 2. This is often called the long turn or the cue card.
Cue card. Okay, this is where things get a little more intense.
Well, it is a step up. You get a topic card with some bullet points, and you have 1 minute to prepare.
Just 1 minute. That doesn't seem like a lot of time to gather your thoughts.
You got to think on your feet.
Mhm.
Then you speak for 1 to 2 minutes on that topic. Something like, describe a memorable journey you've taken, for example.
Okay, so planning and organization are key here.
Absolutely. And finally, you have part 3, the discussion.
This is where they really test your English skills, I imagine.
It's the most challenging part, yeah. This section lasts 4 to 5 minutes, and it's connected to the topic from part 2. But the questions are more abstract, more analytical.
Give us an example.
So let's say your cue card was about a journey. A part 3 question might be, how do you think travel affects people's perspectives on the world?
Right, so going beyond just describing your own experience.
Exactly. You need to show you can think critically, discuss ideas, and express your opinions in English.
Okay, makes sense. Now let's talk scoring. What are the examiners actually listening for during these 3 parts?
So there are 4 main criteria. First, fluency and coherence. This is all about how smoothly and naturally you speak. Are you pausing a lot? Are your ideas well connected? Do you sound, natural?
Right, so it's not just about getting the words out, but making it all flow together.
Exactly. Then there's lexical resource, which looks at your vocabulary. Are you using a good range of words? Are you choosing the right words for the context? Sophisticated language.
So it's not just about knowing lots of fancy words, but knowing how to use them correctly and effectively.
Yes, precision is key. The third one is grammatical range and accuracy. This assesses your grammar. Can you use different tenses, complex sentences? Are you making mistakes?
So showcasing a good command of grammar.
Exactly. And finally, there's pronunciation. This includes clarity, intonation, stress, all those things that make you easy to understand.
So it's not just what you say, but how you say it. It's about painting a complete picture of your spoken English abilities.
Precisely.
Now, I know a lot of people listening are aiming for that top score band 9. Paint a picture for us. What does a band 9 speaker sound like?
Well, a band 9 speaker, they sound like someone who's not even taking a test. They're completely fluent, natural, maybe a tiny hesitation here and there, but overall it's smooth sailing. Their vocabulary, wide-ranging, sophisticated, precise. They choose the perfect word every time. And their grammar, flawless, complex structures, no errors.
They make it look effortless.
Exactly. They make it look easy. Their pronunciation is clear, natural intonation and stress, just like a native speaker. And they sound relaxed, engaged, like they're enjoying the conversation. It's really impressive to see.
It sounds like it. Okay, now let's get practical. Let's talk about some specific strategies and techniques that people can use to actually improve their performance on this test. Where should they start?
Okay, the first thing I think is structuring your responses. No matter which part of the test it is, a clear structure is essential. Think of it like building a house. You need a solid foundation.
So where do you start? What's that foundation?
Start with a brief introduction, just a sentence or two to set the scene. Then develop your ideas with details, examples, explanations, and finally, wrap up with a concise conclusion, like you're tying a neat little bow on your response.
I like that, the bow analogy. And within that structure, what are some things people can do to, really make their responses stand out?
Using linking words and phrases can make a huge difference. Words like furthermore, in addition to, however, for example, things like that. They help you connect your idea smoothly, guide the listener, and make you sound more sophisticated.
Signposting, basically.
Exactly. Now, for part 2, specifically, that 1 minute of preparation time is gold.
How can people make the most of that minute? It seems to go by in a flash.
Mind mapping is a great technique. Just quickly jot down the central topic in the middle of your page and then branch out with keywords, phrases, examples. It creates a visual roadmap for your talk. Keeps you on track.
And for part one, where it's more about those personal questions.
Think storytelling. Don't just give a flat, factual answer. Try to weave in a brief anecdote, add some vivid details. It makes your response more engaging, and it gives you a chance to use a wider range of vocabulary and grammar naturally.
Turning everyday answers into mini stories. That's great advice. Now, let's talk about those core language skills. Fluency, accuracy, and pronunciation. What are some practical things that people can do every day to really improve in these areas?
For fluency, honestly, the key is just to speak as much as you can. Find opportunities to practice speaking English continuously for 2 to 3 minutes at a time.
Even if you don't have someone to talk to.
Even if you're just talking to yourself. Describe what you're doing, explain something you've learned recently, or pick a topic and just talk. It'll help you get comfortable with the flow of spoken English. And don't forget about tongue twisters.
Those can be quite a challenge.
They are, but they're so good for improving articulation. And shadowing, listening to native speakers and mimicking their rhythm, intonation, everything, is really effective for developing a more natural flow.
So shadowing, it's like becoming a vocal echo.
Exactly. Now, for accuracy, especially grammar, self-recording is your best friend. Record yourself speaking, then listen back. You'll be amazed at what you notice.
Because when we're focused on speaking, we don't always catch our own mistakes.
Right, and try transforming simple sentences into more complex ones. Push yourself grammatically. As for pronunciation, there are some amazing online tools out there. And again, mimicking native speakers. Pay attention to the stress patterns within words and the overall intonation of sentences. It all contributes to clear, understandable speech.
It's about training your ear and your tongue to work together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, we can't forget about the mental game. Stress and anxiety can really throw people off on test day. Any tips for staying calm and confident?
Yeah, because test anxiety is real, especially with something like speaking, where you're putting yourself out there.
For sure. Learn some relaxation techniques. Deep breathing exercises can make a big difference. Just a few minutes of focused breathing before your test can help slow your heart rate, calm your nerves, visualize yourself doing well. Picture yourself speaking confidently, answering the questions clearly and fluently. And remember, practice breeds confidence. The more you practice, the less scary the actual test will feel.
It's like anything. The more familiar you are with something, the less intimidating it becomes.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about structure, we've talked about fluency, accuracy, pronunciation, and even managing those pre-test nerves. Let's move on to language itself. What kind of vocabulary should people be aiming for? Is it all about learning a bunch of really complex words?
Well, it's not just about using big words for the sake of it. It's about choosing sophisticated, precise vocabulary that shows you can express yourself clearly and effectively.
Give us some examples.
Instead of saying happy, maybe you could say elated or jubilant, depending on the context. Instead of sad, perhaps dejected or melancholy. Try to use more advanced verbs, too. Ascertain instead of find out. Elucidate instead of explain, that sort of thing.
So it's about expanding your vocabulary range and choosing the right word for the right situation.
Exactly. And don't forget about topic-specific vocabulary. If you're talking about travel, for instance, use words like itinerary, cultural immersion, off the beaten track, terms that show you're familiar with the topic.
So becoming a bit of an expert in the language of different IELTS topics?
Exactly. And one of the best ways to learn new vocabulary is, well, the old-fashioned way, flashcards. But don't just write the word in definition. Use the new word in a full sentence, ideally a sentence that relates to an IELTS topic. That helps you understand the context and use it correctly.
Making those new words stick in your mind.
Precisely. The more you use a word, the more natural it becomes.
Now, let's talk about grammar. What kind of grammatical structures should people be trying to master? Is it all about using really long and complicated sentences?
Well, complex sentences are definitely good to demonstrate your range. But it's more about using a variety of structures accurately and effectively. So think about subordinate clauses, conditionals, relative clauses, maybe even a bit of inversion to emphasize a point. The key is to use these structures naturally so they don't sound forced or awkward.
So give us an example of how someone could transform a simple sentence into a more complex one.
Okay, let's take a simple sentence like, I was tired, so I went to bed early. You could change that to, feeling quite exhausted after a long day, I decided to retire early. Or, although I had planned to watch a movie, my overwhelming fatigue compelled me to go to bed earlier than usual. Do you see how those examples convey the same idea, but with more grammatical sophistication?
Yeah, it definitely adds a layer of complexity and makes the language sound richer.
Exactly. And one of the best ways to practice this is to write short paragraphs on different IELTS topics, consciously trying to incorporate these complex structures. Then practice reading those paragraphs aloud. It helps you get comfortable using them in spoken English.
So writing can actually help improve your speaking skills.
Absolutely. It's all connected.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. Let's revisit each part of the speaking test and offer some tailored advice. Part 1, the introduction and interview. What are some key things to remember for this section?
Part 1 is all about those everyday topics, right? So the goal is to give concise but informative answers. Don't just give one-word responses, but don't ramble either. Aim for that sweet spot, providing enough detail to showcase your language skills.
Okay, give us an example. Let's say the examiner asks you, what do you enjoy doing in your free time?
A very basic answer would be just, I like reading. But a more developed answer might be something like, in my free time, I love getting lost in a good book, especially contemporary fiction. It's a great way to unwind after a long day, and I also find it really helps me learn new vocabulary and see the world from different perspectives. So you've given more detail, you've explained why you enjoy it, and you've used some slightly more sophisticated language.
Yeah, that's much more engaging. Any other tips for part 1?
Try to inject a bit of personality into your answers. Use vivid language, be enthusiastic, smile, make eye contact. Remember, you're having a conversation, so make it feel natural and engaging.
Okay, so practice those everyday topics, be concise, and let your personality shine through. What about part 2, the long turn? That 1 minute of preparation can feel so overwhelming. How can people really nail this part of the test?
That 1 minute is precious. Use it wisely. The key is to quickly plan and organize your thoughts. As we mentioned before, mind mapping can be a really helpful tool here. Just jot down the main topic and then branch out with a few keywords, phrases, or examples.
Create that roadmap.
Exactly. And when you're speaking, aim for a clear structure. Introduce the topic briefly, develop your main points, and then wrap it up with a concise conclusion.
So give us an example. Let's say the cue card asks you to describe a time when you learned something new. What might that look like, from preparation to delivery?
Okay, so you've got your cue card, 1 minute to plan. I might jot down things like, what did I learn? Let's say baking a cake. When did I learn it? Last year for a friend's birthday. Where? At home, in my tiny kitchen. Why was it memorable? Well, it was my first time baking a cake from scratch, and it actually turned out pretty well. So that's my basic framework. Now, when I speak, I might say something like this. Last year, for my friend's birthday, I decided to bake her a cake. It was my first time attempting anything like this. I usually stick to very simple recipes, but I found this amazing recipe online, and I thought, why not give it a try? So I gathered all the ingredients, got out my mixing bowls, and started baking. My kitchen's pretty small, so it felt like a bit of a whirlwind of flour and sugar. There were a few moments when I thought I'd completely messed it up, but I kept going, following the instructions as carefully as I could. And in the end, the cake actually looked pretty decent. It tasted delicious, too, which was a huge relief. My friend loved it, and I felt so proud of myself for actually baking a cake from scratch. It was a really fun and memorable experience. So, you see, I've used my notes to guide my talk. I've kept a clear structure, I've added some details to make it more engaging, and I've hopefully demonstrated a good range of vocabulary and grammar.
That's a great example. It sounds so natural and engaging, like you're just telling a story to a friend.
Exactly, and that's what you want to aim for. Make it a conversation, not a robotic presentation.
Now for part 3, the discussion. This is where things get a little more challenging, right?
It is. Part 3 is all about those bigger, more abstract ideas. But don't let it intimidate you. Remember, the examiner isn't trying to catch you out. They want to see how well you can develop and express your ideas in English.
So how can people approach these more challenging questions effectively?
The key is to go beyond simple yes or no answers. Explain your reasoning, give examples, share your personal insights, and don't be afraid to use phrases like, I think, I believe, in my opinion. It shows you're comfortable expressing your own viewpoints.
So let's take the example from before. The cue card was about learning something new, baking a cake. What kind of part 3 question might follow that? And how might a strong candidate respond?
The examiner might ask something like, some people say that it's important to keep learning new things throughout your life. Do you agree? And a strong candidate might respond with something like, yes, I completely agree. I think it's essential to keep challenging yourself and expanding your horizons. Firstly, learning new things keeps your mind active and engaged. It prevents you from becoming stagnant. Secondly, it can open up new opportunities, whether it's professionally or personally. You might discover a new passion, a new skill that could lead to a career change, or even just a new hobby that brings you joy. And finally, I think learning keeps you connected to the world around you. It helps you understand different perspectives, different cultures, and it keeps you feeling young and vibrant. So they've given a clear opinion, supported it with reasons, and used some good vocabulary.
Right, and they've answered the question directly, which is always important.
Absolutely.
Now, we've talked a lot about practice, and I know this is where a lot of people get stuck. What does an effective practice plan for the IELTS speaking test actually look like?
Consistency is key. Aim for, short bursts of practice every day, even just 15, 20 minutes. It's better to practice a little bit every day than to cram a lot of practice into one session.
So, little and often.
Exactly. And vary your practice. Some days, focus on fluency. Other days, work on your grammar or pronunciation. And regularly practice all three parts of the test.
What about using practice materials?
Absolutely. There are tons of great resources available online and in IELTS preparation books. Make use of sample cue cards, practice questions, model answers. Record yourself as often as possible and listen back critically. Identify your weak spots and work on them specifically.
And how important are mock tests?
Mock tests are absolutely essential. They help you get familiar with the format, the timing, the pressure of the real test. I'd recommend doing a full mock test at least once every 2 weeks. Try to recreate the test environment as closely as possible.
So if you're taking the test in a test center, try to practice in a quiet room, at a desk, with no distractions.
Exactly. And record your mock tests so you can analyze your performance afterward. Be honest with yourself. What did you hesitate? Did you use a good range of vocabulary and grammar? How was your pronunciation?
And seek feedback from others if you can.
Yes, feedback is invaluable. A teacher, a tutor, even a friend who's fluent in English can provide helpful insights.
So it's about practice, feedback, and self-reflection. Constantly analyzing your performance and looking for ways to improve. Now, are there any other creative or interactive ways to practice that can help people really engage with the language and boost their confidence?
Definitely. Role-playing is great fun and incredibly helpful. Find a language partner or even just a friend who's willing to play along. Take turns being the examiner and the candidate. It'll help you think on your feet and get used to responding to different types of questions.
That sounds fun.
It is. And remember that self-recording we talked about. Don't just listen for mistakes. Pay attention to your pacing, your intonation, the variety of your vocabulary. The more you analyze your own speech, the more self-aware you'll become, and that's when the real improvement happens.
It's like becoming your own speech coach.
Exactly. And find opportunities to engage in real-life discussions in English. Join a conversation group, find an online forum, or just chat with friends who are fluent speakers. The more you use English in real-world situations, the more confident you'll become.
It's all about immersion, surrounding yourself with the language.
Yes, make English part of your daily life.
Do you have any examples of students who've used these strategies successfully to achieve a high band score?
I do, actually. I had a student who was aiming for band 9, and she was really struggling with the long turn. She'd freeze up, forget her ideas, and just generally sound quite hesitant. So we worked on a few things. First, we focused on brainstorming and mind mapping during that 1 minute of preparation time. We practiced different cue card topics together, and I encouraged her to time herself strictly. Then, we worked on incorporating storytelling techniques into her responses. She started thinking of her long turn as an opportunity to share a mini narrative, which made it feel less like a test and more like a conversation. And finally, we worked on building her confidence through regular mock tests and feedback. She started recording herself every day, listening back, and focusing on areas where she could improve. By the time she took the actual test, she felt so much more prepared and confident, and she ended up getting a band 9.
That's fantastic. It's so inspiring to hear about real-life successes.
It is. It shows that with the right strategies and dedication, anyone can achieve their IELTS goals.
Now, let's talk about something that can be a real sticking point for learners: identifying and correcting mistakes. How can people become more aware of their own errors and actually fix them?
Well, first, you need to know what your typical mistakes are. Are you overusing filler words like and ah? Are you repeating the same vocabulary over and over? Are your sentences too simple?
How do you figure that out?
Listen to yourself. Record yourself speaking and then really listen to what you hear. Or ask a teacher or a fluent friend to point out your common errors.
And once you know what your weaknesses are, how do you actually work on them?
Be proactive. If you notice you're using fillers too much, make a conscious effort to pause instead. If your vocabulary is repetitive, challenge yourself to use synonyms. If your sentences are too simple, practice using more complex structures. And if you're unsure about your pronunciation, use online dictionaries or pronunciation guides to check how words are pronounced.
So it's about being aware, being proactive, and using all the resources available to you. And finally, how can people effectively track their progress over time and stay motivated on their IELTS journey? It can feel like a long road, especially if you're aiming for a really high score.
Tracking your progress is so important for staying motivated. Keep a log of your mock test scores, write down any feedback you receive, note down any new vocabulary or grammar structures you've learned.
So create a visual representation of your improvement.
Exactly, and set realistic goals. Don't try to do too much too soon. Start with small, achievable goals and gradually increase the difficulty as you progress.
So maybe this week you focus on reducing your filler words, and next week you challenge yourself to use more complex sentences.
Exactly. Break it down into manageable chunks and celebrate those small wins. Every little bit of progress is a step closer to your goal.
This has been such an insightful deep dive into the IELTS speaking test. We've covered so much ground, from understanding the test format and scoring criteria to practical strategies for each part, tips for building vocabulary and grammar, and how to create an effective practice plan.
I think the key takeaway is that while the IELTS speaking test can feel daunting, it's absolutely achievable with the right approach. Focus on consistency, practice, feedback, self-awareness, and most importantly, believe in yourself.
I couldn't have said it better myself. So for everyone listening, remember that effective communication is a skill that will benefit you far beyond just this exam. Keep practicing, stay focused, and never stop learning. Best of luck on your IELTS journey.